So, Living is the British remake of the Kurosawa film Ikaru. Now, if you're familiar with Ikaru, it's a 1950s film about a man who has spent his whole life working in the office and then realizing that he doesn't have much longer to live. But having spent so much time with, just with having like this kind of, office job and not having done much with it, he realizes he hasn't really lived and tries to make the most of his life by making sure that a playground is built. So, this English remake, it takes place I think it pretty much takes place within the same time frame, but it's set in England, and it's more or less the same story. You have Bill Nighy playing Mr. Williams, this guy who works in, works in an office that decides on, permits for building, and has basically spent his whole life just, stooped in bureaucracy, and he's gained a lot of respect over the years, but it's just kind of like a respect that feels hollow. Everyone talks about him as like, like the prim and proper guy. He always does his work. He's efficient. He's kind of quiet and he's dignified. And he's like the cream of the crop, the top ranks. He knows how to deal with everything. And he's the expert on like shuffling stuff around and making sure that nothing gets done. So a pure bureaucrat. And then when he gets the horrible news that he's dying, he doesn't know what to do with it. He grows sad. He's conflicted. He doesn't tell his family because he feels like, it's just going to be a burden on them. It doesn't feel like he needs to know anything. So he decides like, oh, I'm just going to take out some money. I'm going to try to find a way to live. I'm going to try to find the fun stuff to do in life. I'm going to, hang out with this guy, and I'm going to hit up, bars and taverns. We're going to play a sad song, and I'm going to sing along to it, and we're going to indulge in like the arcades and stuff like that. And the thing is, for being a remake of Ikaru, you're going to get a lot of familiar scenes here. And this is one of those... It's one of those remakes that is like, it feels so faithful and heartfelt to adapt like the original and stay true to it. Especially for like, reconnecting with that era. And having similar scenes that like, I love the film. But I love it in kind of the way that I love like any English remake of like a great film, and that it's just directly replicating it. So on one level, I could totally understand if someone doesn't like this film, if they're just like, we already have Ikaru. Ikaru is an amazing film. If you haven't seen it yet, everyone should see it. It's a Kurosawa classic. They're just like, go watch that instead. And I would definitely say, even if you really like, seeing Bill Nighy in this role, you should definitely see the original if you haven't already. But for being an English remake, and having so many similar scenes, I feel like it kind of works here. So like I said, you get familiar scenes here. Like in Ikaru, there's like that tragic moment where the central character wants an old song to be played at a tavern, and he starts singing along with it, and everyone kind of like is digging on what he's singing, but the song gets sadder and sadder, and eventually he's just blubbering the lyrics, and he can barely get through it and just stops and can barely sing another note. It's the same thing in Living too. You have Bill Nighy singing like an old I think it's like an old Scottish song, and just he grows more and more sad, and then just kind of trails off and says he's sorry and kind of shuffles away, and it's a deeply sad moment. It's not, I don't feel it has as much impact as Ikaru, just because like you can feel like the emotion and the tears draining from his face in that scene. But in Living, it's kind of just Bill Nighy kind of like slowly trying to like struggle to maintain that dignity that comes with realizing that I've thrown too much of myself out there. And there are a lot of like, there are a lot more quiet moments in the film that you get to spend with him, where he connects with Margaret Harris, played by Amy Lou Wood, who's essentially just like a young woman in the office who kind of like has dreams and aspirations, and Bill Nighy desiring more and more to stay out of the office and experience life away from all the bureaucracy and just live his life to the fullest. He ends up connecting more with Margaret, while at the same time realizing that it's a bit odd that yeah, I'm hanging out with you and it's odd, but I want to connect with someone in this life, because I don't feel close to my family. I don't feel close to any of the workers in my department, and I want to do something meaningful. And after all that, eventually, yes, he does realize that, yes, oh, there's this playground that is desired to be built, and I could make it happen if I just, try and put my best foot forward. And eventually he does, and he stays firm on it, and eventually, yeah, the playground gets built, and we get that very touching moment where after it's finally built up, he sits on the swing and just takes a moment to enjoy life. And my review is kind of like short on this because it's essentially the same praise of like Ikaru. It more or less goes through the same scenes here, with the exception of a few because it's a little bit tighter. It's much, I believe it's like 2 hours exactly, so it's like a little bit, I believe it's like much more shorter than the original film. And it mostly it touches on like the same beats as the original as well. So it's a fairly standard remake, but it's also a very faithful adaptation where if I'm trying to imagine, like, if you haven't seen Ikaru, if you would, watch this film, just coming in cold, you would probably actually love it. You'd probably love the performance from Bill Nighy. He does have this very, like, quiet, refined performance here where you can see the sadness kind of wash over him with few words, and how, like, a simple dinner can go from being just like a friendly experience to like a depressing one so quickly that his acting here just works. But like I said, it's just it's your faithful yet kind of like I've already seen this before and it's still good, but I feel like the original is much more better. So yeah, I mean, obviously, like it feels like, this goes without saying, but yes, the original Kurosawa film is still the top adaptation of this story, and Living is just kind of like the good but not great interpretation of the same story. It's basically the same story with an English coding, and for what it's worth, for what it's trying to be, it mostly hits all the right notes, and I do love the performances and the pacing and the kind of like quiet and inspiring nature to it. All that works here where I like the film. I like it a lot. It's just not as great as the Kurosawa film.